All right. What if we took the urban sensibilities of Do the Right Thing and the not quite as urban sensibilities of The Thing from Another World, put them together, and ended up with, wait for it, Do the Right Thing from Another World? Yeah? Yeah?
I think we're gonna get sued.
Hello, and welcome to another Film Fury Entertainment and Monster Kid Central joint podcast, episode 2. I'm your host and moderator, Callie. Joining me is Rick from Film Fury. Hi, baby.
Hello, here for part two, the revenge.
And also Rich from Monster Kid Central. Hi, Rich.
Howdy from part two, The Terror Continues.
I was going to say Electric Boogaloo.
Well, that's good too. Yeah, that's probably better than mine.
And today we will talk about remakes. That will be the focus of our conversation.
Okay, so we're going to start with the remakes that we actually liked, probably because they're so few and far between, at least on my side. So I'm going to start with the probably the most controversial one, which is,
The Crazies.
and here's why. I'm not a huge fan of the original.
Mhm.
I thought that although I do like that it had a good story to tell, and it was certainly something that could have come true. Just something about it seemed stilted to me. The acting, whatever it was that a lot of the early Romero projects had, this one kind of didn't for me. So when I heard that it was being remade, I decided to judge it on its own, which I guess is technically wrong because if they're telling you we're making a remake, you should judge it next to the original.
So the original Crazies came out.
In the 70s, I can't remember exactly when, but it might have been 72-ish. I thought the acting in the remake was good. I thought it had a point to make, and I'm pretty sure that Rick disagrees with everything I just said.
I wish I could disagree because the situation is I have never been able to get through the whole movie. I don't know what it is that, because I love all the actors,
Right.
Timothy Olyphant, I like him quite a bit.
Yeah.
But there's just, I don't know, I guess I kept feeling like it was 28 Days the Crazies kind of a thing, it just,
Okay.
the imagery of they're infected just seemed to be taken from so many other films. I was like, I'm just so I mean, eventually, yeah, I should probably sit down and get through the whole thing, though.
I enjoyed the experience much more than I thought I was going to, but it's also the only one where I clearly wasn't crazy about the original.
Mm,
Everything else I go from either really liking the original or absolutely freaking loving the original. And this isn't that case. And I think that's the only reason it made it to the list is
right.
is because it was so different. And I figured, well, okay, certainly no one's going to have this on their list. I think I recommend it whether you've seen the original or not. I just think it's a decent story and it has, at least to me, a little bit of that Stephen King's small Maine town feel to it,
Right.
and I've always liked that. I mean, as good as the Dead Zone was, which I really love the Dead Zone, I especially like the parts where the sheriff's involved and there's no confrontation, it's just talking. And I always thought that was the great thing about Stephen King stuff.
You know what I think it is probably that turned me off about it
What?
is I miss the imagery of the military suits,
Yeah,
the stark white gas mask and everything. Uh, that image, was kind of embedded into my brain, my psyche so much from the original movie.
yeah.
And to me, it didn't feel like they were trying to go for that at all. So,
Well,
I think
may
maybe that was probably the reason I turn against it every time. I'm just like, "Eh."
Yeah, but the thing is, you're right about the imagery of the suits. I mean, I think those add a tremendous amount.
Have you ever you read The Zombies that Ate Pittsburgh, the
Yeah,
the book on Romero?
Yep.
they have production or they have stills of the advertising campaign, and they had guys in suits walking around 42nd Street handing out flyers and everything. Which I
Oh,
was like,
that's
oh
great.
wow, that's great.
That's
Do that
yeah.
now. People are like, oh my god, COVID too. We're out.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I got the pretty much the reaction I expected, but that's cool. I have no
Yeah,
problem.
this is neat because we get to finally have these moments of, oh, okay, we do disagree here and there, but
Right.
it's
But
not, man, you're an idiot for liking that movie. I don't know what your
no,
resolution.
and we get to explain why we find something in the movie or why we find nothing in the movie, as far as our dislike list.
Mhm,
So,
exactly. My number 5 is The Blob from 1988. Uh, Definitely one of my favorite remakes of all time. Written by Frank Darabont, a young Frank Darabont, actually.
yeah,
And I just think it's probably the best example of taking something and not changing it too much. It's basically the same storyline. You do some amalgamation of characters, but it's never, hey, we're gonna go see the Blob, and it's something entirely different than what the Blob was. And the
right,
special effects at the time, simply just outstanding. How they were able to pull some of this off without digital, truly at the time. They actually made, and Rich probably knows this, these blanket-like things basically that they would throw over the actor. So that was all right there, practical, happening on the set.
You showed this one to me.
Yes, yes. And to me, this was just the 1988 was just a golden year for horror movies for me.
yes,
And that, along with my huge crush on Shawnee Smith of all the time, at the time because of what was the TV show? Kate and Allie. That was the sitcom she was on.
right,
And she was one of the kids on that. And it was a great character because she was kind of like Ripley but a cheerleader, which was great.
right,
And then you went ahead and you have Kevin Dillon, who does a great job. They basically took two characters from the original Bob and turned them into one, and it's just a great movie. It's an entertaining flick. Had a wonderful ending that they could have done a sequel, but we never got one. But it's fine because it's just a great, sort of a cliffhanger,
yeah.
So it's definitely my one of my favorite films.
I love the color in it.
Oh, the
Yeah,
pink, yeah, the
yeah.
weird
I
kind
I
of
just
almost neon pink, yeah.
right, and I think it sets itself apart from the rest of the frame. I expected to hate that movie. I'm telling you right now, I expected to go in because let's face it, the original, cost about $18, and if it wasn't for Steve McQueen, and the movie theater part of that Blob, I don't think it would have gotten quite the traction that it did get. I love the fact that this set itself apart visually from it, from the original, and I thought all the performances were good. Like I said, I expected to hate it, and I ended up loving it.
Yeah, and such a great way to bring back a sequence from the original movie being the movie theater sequence.
Yes,
It was so wonderful. Again, you could tell these were people who loved the original movie so much, and they're like, "How can we, at the time, 1988, update it?" But we're not going to, circumvent what the original movie did. We're not going to poke fun at it. It's a terrifying situation to be in when you see what this thing can do.
I agree. I think they did the right thing with Dylan because they didn't go the whole rebel without a cause uh kind of thing, but they did end up making him a sympathetic character. He was at the last MegaCon. I
How's
was
he looking these days? Is
well,
he
he
looking
looks
all right?
he's a Dylan. He's always going to look like himself. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So yeah, of course, he looked like he aged a little bit, but so have we all. But he looked fine. And I walked up to the table, and everything on there was Entourage. And I hadn't realized that he was going to be there, which is weird because I usually do my homework. So I didn't bring anything from the Blob. So when I went up, I said, I noticed that this is all Entourage, and he said, yeah. He says we're kind of doing this thing on Entourage now. We're kind of plugging. I don't remember if it was Blu-ray or whether it was a book or something like that, but they were plugging that. So he says, I'm actually not signing anything that doesn't have to do with Entourage. And I thought to myself, well, then I'm actually not hanging around. So I left.
That's too bad.
I was a little bit bummed out, but whatever.
Yeah.
Next time.
And it's too bad the director Chuck Russell, very good director, but very strange sort of career. Because after this, he did The Mask with Jim Carrey. Then he did Eraser with Schwarzenegger,
Yeah.
and it was odd to see him kind of run from the genre because as a writer, you know, he worked on Nightmare on Elm Street 3, directed Nightmare on Elm Street 3. You think he would have stayed within it. So, you know, I'm curious if he was just really good at what he did and he loved the genre, or if it was I didn't want to be pigeonholed and you try to do other films and then you get in a way you kind of defeat yourself because you leave the genre that you kind of set yourself in
Yep.
and find that okay, I don't really have as much leadway for my vision as I do in a horror movie. You know, maybe like on Eraser, he's answering to a dozen people, including Schwarzenegger, or on The Mask, maybe he's answering to, you know, New Line Cinema at the time. Oh, well, we need you to do this, such and
Right.
such. Because after that, after Eraser, I don't think he's really done anything else, surprisingly.
My mom was a huge Arnold fan, and I took her to the theater actually to see Eraser. And while I was sitting there just almost ready to vomit because of the alligator or
The
crocodile,
digital alligator.
she loved it. So that's my best memory of Eraser was just the fact that she loved it. Damn, that alligator that was rough.
I remember that, yeah. And it's odd because it was not that far removed from Lake Placid, which used practical and a digital alligator that looks so much better.
Oh, that's a great movie. We definitely have to talk about that at some point. That just a magic movie.
Yeah, Callie will be definitely chiming in on that one. She loves that movie.
Good. Yeah, so do I. And to have, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but let's just say to have Betty White in there, it was just I think it was a stroke of genius. So, okay, now Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1979.
Nice.
First of all, Don Siegel, who directed the original, is one of my favorite directors of all time. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, one of my favorite movies of all time. And the fact that it was done on the year I was born, it's always been a special movie to me. So again, it was one of those deals where, well, why are they bothering? It just put on Don Siegel, but I got it. New generation, color, the whole deal. I kind of got it, and I thought, well, if it's done right, this might be good. I saw the cast list, and I thought, well, it looks okay. I mean, it's certainly not Kevin McCarthy and Dana Winter, but it was the new one was Jeff Goldblum, Leonard Nimoy, uh, um,
Yeah, Donald Sutherland, yeah,
Donald
someone you're thinking
Sutherland.
of.
Okay.
Who was the woman? Karen Allen. No,
No, everyone
uh,
thinks that. It's
it's
funny. I've actually heard two podcasts where they've said that. It was Brooke Adams.
Brooke Adams. I went to see this one. I was pleasantly surprised, and I liked it at the time. And then on cable, seeing it multiple times, I realized, geez, it's that good. I mean, it really is. And there are some scenes in it that are actually, I mean, terrifyingly frightening. Terrifyingly frightening. Yeah. Um, it they just work, and the big reveal at the end is to me is really scary, and the fact that they worked in Kevin McCarthy, which was kind of cool, and made sense.
And
So
not in a campy way either.
no,
When he enters the frame, it's not done in a Joe Dante wink wink kind of fashion.
right, nothing against Joe, but no, it just I'm not going to say it's perfect, but again, the original I don't want people to think we think that the originals are perfect. They're not. Every movie is flawed. I think they did themselves proud, and I don't think they hurt the original. I mean, I don't think they did anything to tarnish the whole scheme of things.
No, I agree. I saw this one on cable as a kid, and I actually saw it before the original. So in many respects, it kind of stands higher for me,
Right.
uh, simply due to the actual chronology that I saw the movies. And Philip Kaufman's direction in it, it's so stark, and it's just these wonderful low camera angles on the characters to intensify the paranoia as
Yep.
everything starts to occur. Sutherland, when he gets the phone call, rather he goes to call the police,
Right.
and they say, "Oh yes, Mister So and So, we'll be there shortly." It's like, I didn't give them my name. It's
Yep.
such a because Sutherland, he always kind of had the same performance, but always a very dependable performance.
Right.
But here, I think this is the most different he had ever been, because once he's into the paranoid mode, it's so well done.
Yep.
Jeff Goldblum is a trip to see at such a young age in a kind of a new agey kind of performance. He's just kind of a hippie a little bit.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think the only time I had seen him before that was Death Wish, if I remember
yeah, because he
correctly.
was one of the cronies in two or the original. It was a part
The
two, I think, right?
original.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. I
the
gotta go back and
original.
look at that. But there's just so many moments in that movie when you see the actual creation of your duplicate.
Right.
Just again, special effects at the time, no digital. Every bit of that was right there on camera,
Yep.
and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
To imagine seeing yourself being replicated right in front of you, and the veins. Just those veins always kind of freak me out. They're like a
Yeah.
cross between a vein and a vine, basically. So bizarre.
Yeah. No, I agree. The original had these Cold War implications that were more tame by the 70s. Still there, but much more tame. And we weren't hunting communists, et cetera, et cetera. So I was really happy with the fact that they redid it. Maybe not initially, but after I saw the movie, it was like, yeah, you know what? This was the perfect time.
I think what's very unique about it, for me anyways, watching it, and it could be just the aspect of different generations or whatnot. The idea of a collective is so terrifying to me, in terms of a collective where we all share the same thought,
Right.
and and they're telling you everything's good. This is going to be great. Just come over here. To me, that is so terrifying, and that's what works so well in that. And I think the idea of the body snatchers is that's why it works for me. In a way, it's like a zombie. You're not yourself anymore,
Right.
A- and that is a terrifying concept. But what's even more terrifying, to not be animalistic. It's you supposedly, but it's not. Your soul's really not there.
Yep.
And for living in the Bay Area, I got to see a lot of the shooting locations. So when we took a school trip in like my senior year, I was like, "Oh wow, Donald Sutherland was right here," and everyone's like, "Whatever." Okay. And
Yeah.
they walk
Who?
away to go look at stuff.
Who? Huh?
Body what?
Isn't he with Def Leppard?
Yeah,
No.
that would have been the popular band at the time.
That's one that you showed me, and I remember having those same feelings because the effects were really good. I'm a sucker for practical effects, so
Me too.
I don't like crawly things anyway. So having having to be suffocated by something like that is a fear of mine. So
Yeah.
I imagine
Yeah.
lots of people probably feel that way when they watch the movie. So
Some films are suffocated by overuse of a film score. I
Yep.
can't think of an actual theme in that movie because the music is nearly diegetic. It's only the music that happens in the background. There's very little score, which adds to that atmosphere.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing is, as you said, when everybody starts turning and they start talking about how wonderful it is, it brings to mind the saying, and I'm paraphrasing, but that no one takes your freedom away, you give it away.
Yes.
And it's just, I mean, once they're like, God, it's great over here, kind of that kind of thing. That's just terrifying. So I just thought it was a great movie, and again, didn't expect it.
And when I saw it as a teenager, I was like, "There's no way anybody could convince me to be one of them." But then you got Brooke Adams walking towards you, naked, and you're
It's
like, "No, no, I'm good." I had to think about it for a second. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, maybe
Maybe it's not so bad on the other side.
exactly.
My number 4 is Night of the Living Dead, 1990, directed by Tom Savini, written again by Romero and John Russo. I think this is such an underrated movie. It literally, so many times I'll be in a conversation about remakes with people at a convention or whatnot. It never comes up in the conversation. And it's incredible to me because this, first of all, was one of the earliest remakes.
Yep.
Yeah, that Twilight time. Oh, that was such a bad transfer. That was where they gave it a blue tint. I don't know what
Yeah.
they were thinking. Tom Savini was so pissed off about that.
Yes, but the good thing is they reward you with that after you spend an insane amount of money on it. So
Was it like 30, $35 for that one, as I recall?
uh
And people popped it in thinking there was something wrong with their TV. They're just like,
yep. So anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just
"No,
figured
you're
I'd hold
fine.
it
You're
up
fine."
because it's definitely on my list too.
It was one of the earliest remakes to basically do what The Thing did, which was to take it up a notch, put it into more of a modern time frame. But it's so well directed. It's one of the examples to me that Tom Savini really missed his opportunity when it came to directing, because every element of that film, the camera composition, the characters, the way they interact, it's just brilliant. It really is. And I think if that came out now, I think people would be obviously more accepting to it.
Right.
And the performances, Patricia Tallman as Barbara, what a great kind of subversion of the character to have her sort of a mess. And Tony Todd, oh my God, so good as that character.
I've met almost everybody from the remake, and they're terrific, but on screen man, oh man, it just clicks. Um I love how they take the things you're positive are going to happen
Mhm.
and twist them to the point where you're like, what? What the hell happened?
Yeah, it's a perfect example of subversion done properly. It's You're
Right.
not going to take the entire storyline and turn it on its head, but every time you think something's about to happen or happen the way you remember it from the original, it's like, ah, we got you. We're
Yep.
doing this.
Yep.
And the effects by Optic Nerve, such an incredible zombie design for its time,
Right.
still holds up extremely well.
Oh, I agree completely.
Yeah.
I wish they had been able to do an more uncut in the beginning, but um and again, I saw the videotape on the Blockbuster shelves, and or yeah, I think it was Blockbuster. And yeah, the first thing I thought of was why? And why do you want to go fuck with this? And of course, I just it's a great movie, and to have George writing it, and to have Tom really be able to show off that he's not just a goremeister. It was just sensational. I wish, like I said, I wish they had been able to show it uncut, but not in the cards.
Yeah, I used to have a work print of it. I'd have to look around and see if I still have a bootleg, and the effects that they cut were outstanding.
I know. Too bad. It really is a shame.
I mean, and for a film that initially, for all intensive purposes, it could have come out badly in the sense that Romero and his people did see an opportunity to finally make some money off Night of the Living Dead because they got screwed so badly in its original release. So with Columbia coming to them saying, "Hey, yeah, go ahead and do this," they're like, "Oh, well, we can make some money." But what a great opportunity for Romero and Russo to sit down and say, "Okay, well, how can we present it to a newer generation without changing the dynamic of it and its themes?" and they come through. And again, Savini cannot be undersold in terms of his direction. There's nothing that's a fluke in there.
Nope.
And uh, he, I think, fell into a period of filmmaker very much like the likes of Jeff Burr and a lot of the filmmakers who were making horror films in the 90s. I love blockbuster movies, don't get me wrong. Star Wars, Indiana Jones, I love those films. But there was a period where certain filmmakers and actors could not make that transition from, 90s low budget, mid-range films to the big budget arena. It was just either in the studio's opinion they weren't good looking enough in terms of actors, or oh well, we need a director who can handle $100 million, $200 million movies.
Yeah.
And guys like Savini just got shut out. I mean, really, in an alternate universe, we have like a dozen movies made by that man that were just like literally he would be mentioned. He is probably being mentioned along with Romero. It's like, oh yeah, Romero protege Tom Savini. He definitely had a career as a director. And
Yep.
and who knows? You're never too old. Maybe there'll be somebody who can kind of push him into, hey, don't you want
I
to
hope
direct?
so.
Because I mean, he did an episode of Creep Show, but I don't think you have a lot of room to flex your muscles creatively.
Right.
Because the TV showrunners have a specific style they're going for. Because there's been quite a few guest directors on that show, and they never seem to have their vision necessarily, or nothing comes out
Right.
as distinct to their style, if you will.
I also think he did one of those dead time stories.
He did. Low
Okay.
budget though. Yeah, it was very low
Yeah.
budget. And then he did an episode of Tales from the Dark Side. The great episode with the little monster living in the knee wall.
Yeah.
Uh,
Inside the Closet, I think it's
there you
called.
go. Yeah, yeah. Great episode. Great creature because he did the creature too. Him and his crew.
Yep.
I would. I'd love to see him do a werewolf movie. I don't know why. I just keep thinking a werewolf movie since he loved monsters so much. For a guy who did so many slasher effects, he never got to make a lot of monsters, unfortunately.
Right.
Creep Show being the largest.
Yeah. That was considered Rick Baker and Rob Bottin's territory.
Exactly. Being
So
pigeonholed even then.
yeah, so people went to them first. And I mean, I'm not going to say I can understand it, but I get why. Well, okay, wait a minute. I can understand it in a way because if you were going to make an ape for a movie, you're not going to go to anybody but Rick Baker
Right.
first. I mean, at least until you find out that you couldn't afford it, and then you can go with one of the Bermans. But the truth is, there are people who excel at certain things, and I think maybe Savini got some stuff that Rick Baker wouldn't be offered because they say, nah, Baker's too much of an artist. Savini doesn't mind getting in the mud and the blood and getting his hands dirty. So
Yeah.
I
You
think
don't go to the ape guy for a head coming off. Yeah.
right,
You need
exactly.
that you go to.
I just think Savini his directing is so underrated in that, and unfortunately because he truly believed that the movie was going to be released in some way uncut. He's upset. He wrote he did a book about the uncut Night of the Living Dead. But I mean, he's quite upset by it, and I had his discussion with him, and I'm not going to tip the discussion because I know we're going to try and do it in a future episode. I said to him, I understand that movie didn't come out exactly the way you wanted it. I said, but you can't be down on that movie. I said, you did a great job. You made that impossible remake a great movie. And I said, I don't know anybody who's not attached to the original. I don't know anybody who said, gee, that's what a great idea to remake that. Everybody said, why? Why are you fucking with it? And I said, you turn that into a great movie. And he was, well, yeah, but I wanted better for it. And I said, well, I said, considering the studio experience, I said, I think you got as good as anybody got during that time period.
To me, though, that's the sign of a fantastic filmmaker. If the director can go and say, that's 80% of what I wanted or barely what I wanted, and it's still an entertaining movie. Same thing with Don Coscarelli. He still hates talking about The Beastmaster.
Right.
But I think The Beastmaster is a great, entertaining sci-fi fantasy movie. Even though it came out different than he intended, it's still an entertaining movie. And
Yep.
Night of the Living Dead is a pure example of that. Because people who love it, who actually recognize that it exists, because some people are like, "There's another remake." It's like, yeah, I've never heard anyone talk badly about it.
Right.
So again, I think that it's full proof of what a good director he is.
I completely agree.
The one
It,
thing I would take away from that movie, if I could, is the score. I'm not a fan of the actual score of the movie because
right.
Paul McCullough, who had done some work for Russo because he scored the Majorettes, the slasher movie Russo did. He's attempting to do a synth score, a Carpenter-like score, but it's just too 90s in many respects. I think
Yep.
they should have stayed with an orchestral score. Would have been the way to go. Because I know the studio wouldn't probably like Columbia wouldn't be like, oh sure, use library tracks. That's fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, use elevator music, whatever.
Well, they did it in the first one. Why not do it in this one?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So that's the only thing I would take from the film is I wish it had a better score.
but you know something? I don't even think that goes to just the sound of it. I think it has to do with the writing of it too, because
Mhm.
you take what Carpenter and Alan Howarth did. I was lucky enough to see Alan in concert at a convention. When he started with Escape from New York, it was as current as it was the day it came out.
Right, right. And unpopular opinion, probably. I really feel, not to verge, but we do it. When Carpenter and Howarth separated, there was such a clear indication of how large a part Howarth was with that collaboration together.
I agree.
You
And
really feel the difference.
and to see him alone talking about it, and again, honestly not bragging about it, just he had a conversation about his music, was sensational, but it also highlighted how important he was to the process.
Yeah, very humble guy.
Really great guy, and but yeah, the beginning, that kind of hum when Escape from New York starts, the second that note started, people
Mhm.
went nuts over a single note because they knew what was coming. And
Yeah,
it was terrific. And that factor is everything that Night of the Living Dead doesn't have.
I agree completely.
It's just a forgettable, unfortunately, it's a forgettable soundtrack. And add to the fact that it's forgettable, it sounds like the 90s. Clearly sounds like the 90s. So yeah, you're right. Um, it's too bad. But other than that, man, that movie, phew, that
Yeah,
movie just shocked the shit out of me.
yeah, it rocks. And one last Night of the Living Dead comment before we move on to number 3. Uh, or no, it'd be your number 4 actually, wouldn't it? Or are we on number 3 at that point?
No, it'll be my
We're on
number
3,
4
right?
because you stole one of them. That's all right.
Oh.
You stole a bunch of them. Don't worry. I guarantee you by the time it's over.
So when a colleague of mine, a buddy of mine, went out to Los Angeles to sell our version of a vampire script we had worked on. If you read my column, you'll know what movie that was that we wrote together. We went to a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors in Los Angeles, and William Butler was there, and so was Tony Todd. So I
Right.
bought a Night of the Living Dead 90 poster, had them both sign it.
Nice.
Now, we tried to save money on our last night there because we knew our Greyhound bus was leaving at a certain time. And this is when conventions had all night movie fests going
Oh
on.
yeah.
So we decided, well, we'll skip the room and we're going to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre on 16 millimeter, which is a surreal experience to begin with.
Yes.
But when you're exhausted from like 3 days of talking to people and just being high on the show and everything else, we're phasing in and out, and then we realize what time it is. The movie's almost over. Okay, we need to go get a cab to the Greyhound station. I left my poster, which I had them both sign.
Oh,
I was so out of it, and I didn't realize it until we hit the Greyhound. And Kevin's like, "Where's your tube?" And I'm just like, "No!"
oh,
And I just picture
jeez.
someone going, "Hmm. Oh," you know. So
Wow.
someone out there got a free Night of the Living Dead 90 poster signed by 2 of its stars.
Oh, jeez. What a
Yeah.
sucky story. My
Yeah, that was
God.
heartbreaking.
And it wasn't
Oh,
personalized.
Mhm.
awful.
I don't recall actually. I probably did. It probably said, to Rick or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
It's funny. Just another verge about having it signed with your name on it, inscribed.
Mhm.
Um, somebody said to me, "You do understand on the autographs that it brings the value down," and I said, "I'm never selling them. I'll leave them to somebody, but I'm not selling them." So it's true. I could care less. I would much rather have my name on it. I don't care about the what would be the aftermarket or whatever you want to call it. Um,
Because it's not
besides,
value to you.
yeah, that's the experience to, at least for me, is that they put my name on it and it reminds me of that connection. 4 because one got stolen.
Well, you guys overlap, which is fine.
We're part of the collective, the shared thought process.
Yeah, we're back to that again. Okay, so hopefully I'm going to steal this one from him because to be quite honest with you, I know we both agree on the last one. So anyway, David Cronenberg's The Fly.
Oh my goodness. Yes, yes.
Um, Same deal. I absolutely loved the original. And when I heard that Cronenberg was going to remake it, I did geez, why? But because I saw him remaking that movie. And what he decided to do was tear up everything and start anew and turn it into a love story, which my wife, who can't abide gore, sat through and sat through like it was Sound of Music. Just accepted the entire thing, um, because it's a love story, and a pretty damn good one too when you consider that the two people who were in love were in love.
It translates to the screen very well.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it's very palpable, yeah.
and it's not only is it a lovely tragic movie, but the design of it is just sensational. I mean, they got these telepods that look like some kind of piston. I mean, just everything about it is sensational. Witty dialogue, um, great performances by everybody. I mean, it's one of those movies where I'm not going to say there were budget problems. I'm just going to say that they didn't have unlimited funding. So, and they obviously went with talented and expensive actors and talented and expensive effects, but not even the forget the secondary. Is there such a thing as a third dairy and a fourth dairy? Those actors were terrific. I mean, everybody was good. I mean, forget the fact that I have the Blu-ray, but um, if it's on TV, and I mean even commercial TV, if I go by, I gotta stop and
Yep,
watch
you're
it.
gonna watch it.
And then the second they cut out a swear word, then I'll go, "Oh, what the fuck am I doing?" And I'll go get the Blu-ray and put it in. But it's a sensational movie. The production company was as much of a surprise as anything because it was Mel Brooks's company.
Exactly. That's what I was going to go down. If you were to list everything, every element of this film that makes it an amazing thing, you got Mel Brooks to start.
Right.
For a guy known for comedy to be able to recognize the talent Cronenberg had, and to say, yeah, this is the guy we should put on this, because he could have put any number of people.
Sure.
He could have went with a standby like John Frankenheimer or any studio director they could have went ahead and approached.
Yep.
But he goes to Cronenberg. I think this is one of Cronenberg's best movies because it's an example of what he can do when he hasn't spearheaded the entire thing. He
Right.
hasn't written it, but he's be able to bring his vision to it. And really, it's just a wonderful example of collaboration. Because then you have the incredible screenplay by Charles Edward Pogue, who, talking about a guy that he really should have just kept his mouth shut, incredibly talented, but too opinionated. He would just, you can only talk so much smack and it comes back at you, unfortunately. Joe Carnahan had that happen when he criticized MGM for, going against the idea of casting who he wanted in the picture. Same thing happened here. This guy should have made a dozen movies as a screenwriter, because you look at The Fly, you look at Psycho 3, such a well-written sequel, such a quirky, odd, insane movie, which was originally more insane in his movie because the Jeff Fahey character in his script
Yep.
was a serial killer. And I'm like, what a great concept. You got
Yep.
two killers tangling with one another. Dragonheart, which is a beautiful fantasy movie that to this day I still can't watch because I get teary-eyed at the end. It's
Yeah.
a really great film. The cast, Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, like you said, they were in love and you can just feel it, and they just work off each other just so tremendously well. Goldblum is Goldblum here. And everything he does in his performance as Brundle, it's just him, and it comes out in every other movie. You see a little of it in Malcolm, but this is the first time we saw him as a leading man, and he does
Right.
he does a great job. He's quirky, he's funny. When he makes the transition into what he's becoming, you feel for him. It's such a terrifying thing for him to be going through.
Yep.
Obviously, you can use it as an analogy to different, terminal diseases. And his performance, it was just outstanding. The score by Howard
Oh,
Shore, that crescendo, that piece of music when, he's out on the streets, on the prowl, that music ended up in so many different movie trailers afterwards, because
yep.
people were like, oh, let's just steal that music
Right.
because it makes our
Exactly.
cheesy movie look so much more interesting. They used it for Dead Ringers, which was made, what, 2 years later, 3 years later? They were still using that score in movie trailers.
It's sensational. I mean, it really is one of those soundtracks that you have no problem listening to on a regular basis. And I actually liked the pop hit "Help Me" by what was it, Brian Ferry, I guess.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
I
actually.
actually like that song, and it's like, geez, really? I mean, it's to the point where I just like everything about it.
And another MVP from that movie, John Getz
Yes,
as Stathis. What
yes,
an amazing performance by a guy. The character's a complete prick, but you like him. Like
right,
he's a dirtbag. He's using his key to get back into her apartment. He's walking out all studly from the shower. It's like, dude, she's done with you. It's over. But he's so good because you get on his side.
right,
You really back him after she comes to him, and he's supportive. He's not being a complete asshole about the situation.
right.
And his dialogue, just so many great lines. Thank you for making all my paranoid delusions come true. She's like, you don't understand, I'm on something. I'm onto something big here, Stath. It's huge. What is I just thought,
Yeah,
oh, what a great line. And I always love that guy anyways, because I don't know if you recall this show from ABC, Magruder and Loud. Do you remember
yeah.
the show?
I do remember it.
It was the most ridiculous idea. It was an action drama about two cops who were partners. They fall in love, secretly get married because apparently that's the thing you can't do on the LAPD, and then they get apartments together where they build a door in between, so that way it doesn't look like they're living together. It was the stupidest idea, but
Yikes.
it had Catherine Harold, who was one of my kid crushes, and and I was like, oh, that's the dude from The Fly, you know. So it's just it is, man. It's a beautiful movie. The sequel, debatably, definitely not as good. I think it's another one that I wish. And again, we've talked about. I really don't care if younger generations want to delve into older movies or not. If you love this stuff, you're going to find it. But I wish more people would watch this movie because I think even in today's particular cinema going experience, I think it would still click with people because it's like you said, it is a love story. Like, fine, I could see people when I was a teenager not getting why I like Psycho. All right, fine, I get it. You can't get into characters calling each other pal, or stuff. That's fine. But I think The Fly, I think it could still click with people if it was brought back into the limelight.
Yeah, I agree. There's something about that movie. No, there's everything about that movie. It just works on so many levels. Um, but you mentioned Mel Brooks before, and who would have figured? Well, Mel Brooks picks David Lynch and Cronenberg, two of the most visual directors out there to work with.
Mhm.
Just to deny Mel Brooks's overall talent. I mean, we could do a show on Mel Brooks just from the dark side of Mel Brooks, let alone the funny side of Mel Brooks. But it's ridiculous how good this guy is picking talent. I mean, the producers. Somebody goes up to him and says, this could be a musical," and he goes, "Yeah, you're right," and just does it. Where he's responsible for many of the songs and the lyrics. It's like, holy crap. I'm sitting there looking at Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder thinking, wait a minute, he's doing a musical version of this? What is he, nuts? And again, worked perfectly. And Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick were brilliant in it. So, I understand it's a Verge, but it's based on the two terms that Mel Brooks took it to the horror genre, um, ends up being David Lynch and David Cronenberg.
See, and I might be presumptuous on this part, but I get the impression he was the type of producer that said, "Okay, I've chosen you because you got your skill. Go do your thing."
I would agree.
I never get any inkling that he was, micromanaging these two
Right.
guys in any way, shape, or form.
I think he would agree with that. I think he
Mm,
would agree that it's a ridiculous idea to hire somebody for their talent and then strip them of it.
yeah, like so many do.
Yeah, like so
And
many do.
I wish Cronenberg had not been. It's so okay. It's a weird comment. I wish he wasn't the auteur that he is because I would have really loved to seen what else he would have done with other films as being basically a director for hire.
Right.
I would be interested in knowing if he would be able to still get his vision through.
Yeah.
Because we had Total Recall, which he nearly directed, and then I found out recently he was offered Top Gun of all things.
Really?
Two horror directors were offered Top Gun at one point by Bruckheimer and Simpson,
Wow,
David
that's
Cronenberg
weird.
and John Carpenter. And I'm
That's
like,
weird.
what does a John Carpenter Top Gun movie look like? Aside from Tom Atkins probably being one of the lieutenants in it or something, which he
Well,
would have worked perfect for,
yeah, he would have to be.
Yeah, but it's like it goes back to that thing, man. When you're hot, just make stuff because I would have loved to seen a David Cronenberg Top Gun movie or Total Recall, and
Right.
then go back and do Existence, go back and do Crash, do all those other things. That's fine. Yeah, you stole one of mine too. So, but actually, I'm just gonna go to what was my number three, Evil Dead, directed by Fede Alvarez, a movie that is probably one of the times I took your stance. I was like, what the fuck are you people doing wrong? You don't remake Evil Dead. There's no Bruce Campbell. What's wrong with you? There's going to be a chick in place of Ash. What are you doing? This is ridiculous. You're just going to ruin my movie is what you're going to do. The first 10 minutes of that movie is a fucking gut punch.
Yeah.
You watch that and you're like, holy shit, they're mean business here. They are serious about what they're doing. And it's such a simplistic idea, as simplistic as the original film. You know, what
Yep.
do you have in the original film? A bunch of people hanging out at a crappy cabin.
Yep.
Here, they add a little more substance to it, and you're introduced to a character who's going through a lot of trouble, drug related, and her friends are meeting her at a cabin so she can shun and go into detox. We find out through dialogue that she's done this before, so it kind of pulls from reality there. Drug addiction doesn't end the first time; people have to do it multiple times.
Absolutely.
And they find the good old Book of the Dead, and everything just goes at that point at like a roller coaster pace. The Some of the kills in this movie, some of the body horror in this movie is so insane. You know, I was wincing in my seat. I'm just like, "Oh
Yeah.
my goodness." It's just I couldn't believe how many people hated it. I was so shocked because I
Right.
figured, well, if I made the turnaround, everybody's gonna love this movie. And then I'm reading the reviews, and it was just completely skewered by the critics, people on Fangoria, different horror publications. No one seemed to like the movie. And I understand that Raimi, along with Campbell, obviously, they had created such a memorable movie series, but to not be open to the fact that this is great filmmaking, the
Right.
score, everything in it. You felt for every character that died in this movie, every single one. I didn't want to see go.
Well, I think this movie suffered from the Halloween 3 syndrome. Uh,
Mhm.
if you're not going to put Michael Myers in the movie, I don't want to see it. If you're not going to put Ash in the movie, I'm not going to see it. And you know something, I don't think it would have been as good with Ash in it because first of all, Campbell wasn't going to play him again. What you would have ended up with is another Ash. And
Mhm.
trust me, and I'm talking to our audience, trust me, if you think you hated the woman in it, you would have hated someone else playing Ash. I mean, I truly believe that you would have hated it, or
And I
playing the hero Ash. You know,
See, and I think that project fundamentally changed because I recall reading, I'd have to track down where, at one point it was going to be an Ash character, and it was Justin Theroux, who traditionally plays, comedic bad guys and that type of thing.
right,
And I don't have a problem with him as an actor, but the moment I heard that, I'm like, I can't see that. So I think once Fetty came in, I think is when they decided to like reimagine the whole thing, if you will, and it definitely went the better direction.
right. Callie, is that one of the ones you saw or no?
No, I don't think that this one was shown to me. I actually have a very like vivid memory. Ricky's since told me that it was actually Evil Dead 2.
I
Which
can
I showed to
understand.
Niobe. I showed her Evil Dead 2 on
Right,
the projector a few nights ago, and it was so funny to not it was funny to watch her not realize it was okay to laugh at it,
right,
because she was like, "But am I supposed to be laughing? Why is he so stupid?" I'm like, "That's Ash, and that's
why?
that's why you get behind Ash, because he's
Right.
kinda stupid."
Yep.
And that was cute.
Yeah, Ash is capable of being as just as stupid as we can be. So
Mm.
that's why we fall in love with him. I did not like uh, Evil Dead 2 when it first came out because I thought, my God, they're poking fun at the first one, and then I got into the rhythm of it, and it was
Mhm.
like, yeah, okay, I completely get this because I love the first one.
People talk so badly about it, but then Evil Dead Rise came out, which I've seen twice now, and I don't like it. It doesn't to me it's just not a good film overall. To me, it's not scary.
Right,
I don't like the characters. You're killing a bunch of kids, which, I'm not against killing kids in a horror movie, but we don't even get to like them well enough when
right.
they start getting dispatched. And again, I just really feel they put a lot of time and effort into creating believable, likable characters in the Alvarez version.
Becomes very Friday the 13th Part 8 kind of, just you don't get to know anybody before they're killed, and it's like, well, then I don't feel anything, you know. And especially when they come back and they say, "Well, you're not supposed to feel anything." No, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to feel something other than boredom.
It's just it is. It is such a great fucking movie, man.
So I take it that this is probably one that I'm not going to be able to watch.
I don't think so because it's extremely gory.
Okay.
You know, which is unfortunate because the acting is really top notch in it.
That's all you gotta say.
You know? Alvarez is the only reason I'm excited about the new Alien movie because it looks horrible. It doesn't. I hate the idea of creating an Alien movie with a bunch of youngins because it doesn't
Yeah,
make any sense to me. You know, why are a bunch of 20 somethings running a spacecraft? I'm like, give me the original Alien. Truckers in
yeah,
space. That's what I like.
yeah.
But it's Alvarez, and fingers crossed he's going to come through.
Yeah, it does have that kids borrowed the car kind of feel to it. It's like
Thank you. Exactly.
it's like what
And Alvarez, man, he's such because you saw Don't Breathe, obviously.
yeah.
I saw that in the theater. And both times, Evil Dead and Don't Breathe, he is one of the few directors who I've noticed can elicit a response out of an audience to where people are screaming or laughing because of the insanity of it. The Turkey Baster
Yep.
and Don't Breathe, that audience was going ape shit. They're like, this is not happening right now. You are not going to do this to this girl, and you
Right.
didn't know what was going to happen. And that's what it is. You're in the mind of you're in the hands of a crazy man, and that's the sign of a good horror director. When the audience is like, is this about to happen? Is this really going to go down like this?
Yep.
And so he is my hope for that.
See, my plus is that anything with the Alien or Predator franchise, uh, my grandson's going to go nuts over it anyway, so I can watch
Right.
him going nuts over it, even if it's bad.
So now our list is getting interesting because we're stealing our choices.
Right.
So what is your
So I
I
have
don't like to say stealing as much as it is you guys have overlapping.
shared collective thought on the process?
Shared
I guess having the numbers are kind of silly after a while
no,
because if we're sharing something,
I'm out and out stealing. No, but that's the reason why we decided not to share lists because we didn't want to be influenced because I guarantee you if I knew, I'm sorry, that his were I'd be like, all right, so I should try and come up with something. I don't want to come up with something else. These
Yeah.
five are these five for a reason. Callie knows that, and I think I texted you last night to let you know that I did put an honorable and dishonorable mention
Yes.
on
So did I.
here, but I'm going to go with my favorite, and then if we have time, we'll do the honorable mention. Here we go. The Thing.
The thing.
Look, I am completely aware that this is not a remake, but you can't get into the semantics of this because is the 1931 Frankenstein a remake because Edison made Frankenstein in 1910, a short movie. So is Frankenstein a remake? No, it isn't. And the deal is I'm juggling back and forth with whether this is a remake. The bottom line is there was a movie, The Thing from Another World, and when I was growing up, that thing was balls. I mean, there's a jump scare in that where they've already proven that it's not behind the door and they go to another door. So of course, being a kid, there's nothing behind that door either, except there is. And it just, I mean, I think I levitated off the couch the first time I saw it. And it's got fantastic dialogue, the original, because people talk over each other. And it's,
Yeah, that was a Howard Hawks thing. Yeah.
and I think that was the first time I noticed it. I mean, I'm sure subliminally I knew that in the past. I knew that, the dialogue wasn't flowing the way it usually did in movies. But this is the first time I actually knew that it was a choice of the actors and the director to make it more real. when I heard Carpenter was doing it, I was excited about it. This is one of the few that I didn't go, why? Because the thing from Another World is dated. I 100% it's dated. I could see this being a remake. The funny thing is, I forget the actress's name in the original, but she is not a tall woman. She has short-ish black hair. And to me, I always thought she was very Adrienne Barbeau-ish. So of course, I assumed that Adrienne was going to get that part in the movie, because I honestly didn't think anybody had the balls to just do it with all men. And I'm glad in a way that Carpenter did it with all men, because no 8 guys are going to jump on a woman in the 50s, but when Carpenter made this movie, it had been a change, and they would have been lining up uh, for Adrienne Barbeau, because I would have lined up for Adrienne Barbeau. But I mean, I was as positive gets that Adrienne Barbeau was going to be the female actor in this movie. What The Thing has, besides the obvious special effects, is that every actor in that movie can act fucking circles around people, and they're not considered main actors. They're considered character actors in a way, although there are actors in there. Wilford Brimley is always Wilford Brimley, period.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell is always Kurt Russell, but they all became those characters. And oh my God, the acting, you could not have done that movie with shit acting. It's in a way, it's like 12 Angry Men, or it's like Once Upon a Time in the West. It's not going to work with leading men. Everybody in that movie, whether they're a leading man or not, has to be a character actor in the true sense. Has to absorb into that character, and
Believe them.
Because
and
everyone has a line. Everyone has a line of
yeah,
dialogue that contributes. No one says anything in that movie that's like, "Oh yeah, Bob's over here. We got to give him a line." Everything
exactly.
from Windows saying, "Childs, what if we're wrong?" That's a great line delivery.
It is.
You got everything to dude who they want to make in charge, and he's like, "Fellas, I just can't do it." You believe him that emotionally this dude's but he's also possibly the thing. So
Right.
yeah, every single person in that movie has their moment, and you don't see that in movies a lot of times.
No, but it had to be that way. I truly believe that it had to be that way. Everybody had to have their lead part in it, or you would start saying, well, yeah, he's not the Thing because he's a background character.
Everybody.
Or he's too big of an actor, so there's no
Or
way
he's too big of an actor. Yeah.
Mhm.
Of course, I know people who made that mistake with Janet Leigh in Psycho, that, well, she's not going anywhere.
But before we get off the dialogue, what's your favorite, or off the top of your head, favorite line from the movie?
Tied to this fucking couch.
Oh, you stole mine. You stole mine. I love that line.
There's just no doubt about it. But it's the lead up to it. He's got like,
Right.
I don't know, 15 words of dialogue, and then and it's
That he
it's
explodes.
as calm as his demeanor always is in the movie. He's not one of the characters who's yelling. He's not one of those "you got to be fucking kidding me" characters. He's kind of measured. So when he goes, I'd rather not spend the rest of this evening tied to this fucking it's just great.
Yeah.
It's just genius shit. I mean, it really is. And there's a ton of great lines in that movie. But that's the one where if I have it on and I'm semi paying attention to it because I own it, so I can do that, I have to stop what I'm doing. In plain word, if I'm walking across the room, I have to stop and look at the TV, because it's just phenomenal.
Callie will do that. If I have it on for some reason and she comes into the room, she'll start the movie over
I
and
tell
watch
him
the
he
whole
has to
thing.
start it over. He has to
Yeah.
start it over. I've walked into the room. I'm here now. We got to watch the whole thing.
Right. What I do that with initial viewings, if Eileen is on one of her excursions, classic example is I put in John Wick when she was out, and I got 10 minutes into it and I thought, nope, I'm saving this. And I did, because I knew that I wanted to experience it at the same time. And there are other movies that I can tell 5 minutes in she has no interest in, and I'm cool with that. That's why every time she goes on a trip, as her plane is taking off, I'm watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because that's what kicks it off. And there is no way in hell she doesn't even like the sound of chainsaws in our home at any point. So if somebody's cutting a tree outside, she's walking around nervous. So
It's a nerve-wracking noise.
oh
It's
yeah.
not
And
gentle at all.
yeah, the thing is, it's it's it should be a school course unto itself about what you do when you have limited locations, deliberate limited locations, a set of actors where no one else is going to join after the first group that you see. You know who's in the movie 3 minutes in, and that's it. And where you have to rely on every single actor to be so believable that the second somebody blinks, your plot's gone. You're just, all the tension is gone. Rick, take it away, because I've said a lot of good things, but I know you have a lot of good things to say about this flick too.
No, I think one of the elements that a lot of people don't talk about with that film, because they talk about Rob Bottin, obviously, Carpenter, the actors, the screenwriter, Bill
Yes,
Lancaster. What an incredible example of writers know how to fucking write. And what I mean by that is that this is the guy who wrote the Bad News Bears
yeah,
first and second movie. That shows you, and that's how poor writers are now. You would never see that sort of eclectic sort of career out of a writer.
right.
They either just do this type of movie or that type of movie. You never see one who can go back and forth. And you just look at those two examples, two great movies. I love the original Bad News Bears.
Absolutely.
Walter Matthau's great. But to think, this is the guy who wrote The Thing, a paranoia horror film. And the fact that he was going to do Firestarter with Carpenter
Yep.
until that fell apart. Oh my God, that would have been an incredible adaptation of that book.
Yeah, that could have been great.
But the
Absolutely.
dialogue he comes up with, you just believe that these guys are in the thick of it. And it seems true to form. I feel people would react the way they do in this movie.
Yes.
You got Childs and the stoner. Help me here.
Yeah.
Childs. Oh, I know there's people watching right now going, dude, it's so and so, because I've
I
done the
know.
same thing on podcasts before. But they turn against each other. It's like,
Right.
who says I want you going with me? It's like, wait a minute, you're bunkmates. A few scenes ago, you're smoking pot and watching reruns of game shows.
Yep.
So everything it's a very well crafted screenplay.
It is. It is. It's as brilliant as the rest of the movie is, and it's as brilliant as it needs to be to carry this movie.
And it's the most John Carpenter non-Carpenter score
Yes.
of any of his
Oh,
movies.
absolutely.
Even to know he had an incidental music, the actual theme that
Yep.
Morricone came up with.
Oh, I was positive it was Carpenter.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I realized it wasn't. Yeah, brilliant stuff.
Palmer.
Interesting how Palmer. There you go. Chariot to the gods, man.
I hate the fact that I didn't know that.
It's really interesting that Tarantino used a lot of the music that wasn't used on the soundtrack to The Thing for Hateful Eight, which I thought was really amusing, because he sort of claimed that Hateful Eight was his version of The Thing, which when I read that initially, I'm like, that's kind of fascinating. But then I'm like, it's really not. It's just a snowed in location, if you want to call it your
Yeah,
version of it.
yeah. I think anybody who now writes a seclusion kind of story uh, could make the same claim. But I'm not sure I believe it either. Then you could go back and say, well, okay, so Carpenter made his version of 12 Angry Men. Yeah,
Exactly.
okay, but he didn't, I mean, so yeah, I think look, I like Tarantino and we'll talk about him in a future episode of one of our podcasts. There are times when he says some stuff and I just sit there and go, "Really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Death
Mm,
Proof, that's your slasher movie? Really?
yeah,
Okay,
okay."
if you say so.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
really a slasher movie. You didn't understand the assignment, but okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So,
and the thing, I find it really cool how it's become not necessarily a subgenre, but it's definitely been ripped off and reused in other horror films and even things we love. The X-Files had a thing kinda homage.
oh my God, and it was
Ice,
so good.
yeah,
I got the I thoroughly enjoyed that. But
I remember
but
watching that
yeah,
one thinking, "Oh my god, they're doing their version of the thing. This is
right.
great."
And I was having a reaction saying, "Okay, guys, watch it now. Don't get to the point where you're going to remake the movie
Yeah,
in an
don't test
hour-long
each other's
show."
blood too much. Don't have anything popping out
Right.
from somewhere.
So that was I was just worried. I didn't want that to be a jump the shark moment,
Mm.
because it would be like, oh no, 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 no. But I ended up really liking that episode. And I thought it went a long way exactly when it needed to of giving us more information about Mulder and Scully.
Now, what did you think of the prequel that had the
Mm.
nerve to call itself The Thing all over again?
Well, first of all, that's a shitty choice to make. Um,
Mhm.
I would much rather they had even done the thing number 0. I mean, I would have preferred anything, pun intended, to having it call that, because then what is Carpenter's The Thing become? I didn't hate it. I think one of the worst things that happens to a movie is it becomes eh by the end of it. I would much rather hate a movie than not give a rat's ass about a movie when it's over, because when I hate something, I at least invested emotion in it. If I'm apathetic towards it after 90 minutes of watching it, man, oh man, that's a huge fail.
The thing that no pun intended, that movie had on its side was it was gonna be practical effects, and they
Right,
shot it with practical effects, and some fucking nut job over at Universal is like, "No, that doesn't work nowadays. We need digital," and redid 98% of their work.
right.
And I've seen test reels of the footage, and the original stuff looked great.
Yep.
That would have been that movie's saving grace. Even with a shitty storyline,
Yeah, yeah, it
that would
might
have
have
felt
been.
good.
Anytime somebody says, well, you have to understand it's it was digital effects, or you have to understand its practical effects. I always say to them, well, they can be mixed. And the example I hold up is find find shitty work in Jurassic Park.
Combination of the two there.
1994, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
And as
Mhm.
far as I'm concerned, it's an unbeatable effects movie. There's nothing in there that you say, oh well, yeah, if they could have only done it 6 months or 6 years or 6 decades later, it could have been that much better. No, the effects work flawlessly. They're beautiful. And again,
Stargate, same thing. Stargate was a combination of both practical and digital. So
right.
every one of the ships and everything, all of those were actual miniatures,
Yep.
and which they did partially due to financial reasons. But for Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, it's like, no, that calls out to what we're trying to do. We're trying to do a Star Wars, and Star Wars didn't have all that going for it at the time.
Right. So yeah, I mean, there are movies that were done with the right combination, and you don't know the right combination until you've got your movie made and you send it in, and smart people start doing the effects. But Jurassic Park has the right combination in it that we're talking about it 30 years later. Before Spielberg came to his senses, I was afraid Spielberg was going to end up dicking with it.
Mhm.
The special edition. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, dude, after you took the guns out of ET, and again, they're back in, and he said, look, I don't know what I was thinking, but chalk it up to whatever. I don't care that he makes a bad movie every once in a while, or a movie that I don't love. Let's put it that way. I don't want to say it's a bad movie. I have a problem that he on two of his movies at least, he started dicking around with them after they were done. That's George Lucas shit. I mean, man, don't do that. Leave him the hell alone. So,
Yeah, see, this is where you will be on one of my Film Fury episodes, because I will never take from Spielberg that he is not an amazing filmmaker. He is.
absolutely.
When I saw Ready Player One, even watching it now, there's something about the finale of that picture that just gets me teary-eyed.
Yep.
Maybe it's just the core friendships and everything. There's just so much in there that's great. A lot of him getting out there originally was who he knew. He had opportunities that most filmmakers his age never would have gotten. And Jaws is still a happenstance movie. It's a movie that, not saying people on board weren't creative, but if they had gotten their first choice, if they had done what they wanted to do, we would not be talking about that film.
If
I sure as I'm sitting here, I believe that. If
if the
that shark worked every time,
That's exactly the point I was going to make. If the
mhm,
shark worked, the movie wouldn't have.
absolutely. Same thing. One day we'll get into the discussion about Halloween. How I think Halloween is one of those happenstance movies that if Carpenter had gotten his way, that movie fundamentally would be different
Right.
in every way.
The difference is Carpenter had proven himself with Assault on Precinct 13.
True.
So,
But
so
Spielberg had done Duel, which I think is still, for a
well,
TV movie,
that's
is pretty
true.
damn good. Yeah.
That's true. That's a valid point. I think Carpenter lucked out with Halloween, but I also just love that freaking movie.
Yeah.
So,
But Assault still showed his talent as a filmmaker even before that. And I think he's another one of those directors. I think he got into a weird space in between his personal issues with drugs and alcohol and whatnot.
yeah,
I think I think he did get into a weird mindset of, what movie do I do next? Should I be doing this type of movie? And I think Starman was a very good example of him trying to do one for the team,
yeah.
because it's still him. That movie feels like him throughout. The score not so much, but the imagery, everything's shot like a John Carpenter film. So Michael Douglas and Columbia left him alone to make that movie.
And
So
and much like The Fly, the ladies love it.
yeah,
The
yeah,
ladies
exactly.
love
Yeah.
Starman, and I enjoyed it too. And there's some funny lines in it, and there's some dramatic stuff in it, and I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But it also has a lot to do with the fact that the woman I was dating enjoyed the experience too.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say the woman I was dating resembled Karen Allen. I'm like,
No, no,
oh
no,
wow, man, good job.
no, 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 no.
It was funny
So,
too, because the first time I saw Starman was VHS, and we were at the
oh,
video
geez,
store, and I see John Carpenter Starman, and I'm like, hmm? And I'm looking at it, and then we watch it, and I'm just like, Marion Ravenwood's in this movie. This is awesome. And it's a good flick. I think it's still really well done, but I do. I think he just let his emotions control him too much on his future work. And I think if he had been able to do more movies like The Thing, and when I say that, not a sequel or not an identical movie, but if he had just approached his other director for hire work from the point of view of, how do I make this movie as much of me as possible?
right,
Because if you look at Memoirs of an Invisible Man, there's no real element to that movie from Carpenter's other work at all.
yeah,
So it kind of just oozes, this is a director for hire gig. Even
right.
though ultimately I think it's a good movie,
So
but
do I.
it's really not him. Because one we've already discussed, actually. So my honorable mentions was The Hills Have Eyes,
All
which I
right.
think is a really solid. Wes Craven scripted it, so he produced it, so he still had a hand in choosing the director and everything. I like that one a lot. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we already spoke about. King Kong, I already know your feelings on King Kong from past conversations, but I think that the Peter Jackson movie is really commendable, even to know it runs at like 3 hours long.
Yeah.
I still like that movie a lot.
Okay.
A little movie called Rob Zombie's Halloween, which we know how you feel about that. But one that I didn't get to talk about, Body Snatchers, the third one, directed by the director of Driller Killer, Abel Ferrara.
Yeah.
I think is a really interesting. It kind of feels like it was meant to be a sequel, but ultimately they said it was a remake, written by Stuart Gordon and Dennis
Yep.
Piole. Was
Yep.
going to be Gordon's film, but then his health, his heart issues took effect, unfortunately, and he stepped off the project.
Yep.
I think it's a really good, tight 85-minute little movie. I think it delves into the paranoia very much like the previous remake quite well. The cast is stellar. Meg Tilly's scene when she's been taken over and she's calming her husband down. She is just it is so different than the other body snatchers we saw in the remake, the
Yep.
previous remake. It's almost like they have an identity, but they don't because she's using her hands, which is
Right.
something the other ones didn't do. But she says, "Listen to me. Where are you gonna run? Where are you gonna hide? Nowhere." She did it. It is such a great line of dialogue. Not only was it in the trailer, they're like, "This is a money shot," but then it's dubbed in at the end when you don't know if our heroes have truly gotten to safety or not.
Right.
I think it's a really underrated movie. I
I
do.
I will agree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Forrest Whitaker's small part in it.
Yep.
He walks in and steals the movie for like 5 minutes, because he's so gifted anyways as an
Yeah,
actor.
I was going to say, to be fair, he does that pretty much every time he has a
I
walk
know
on.
Color of Money, he practically stole it, and he was a youngin'. He was still learning the trade at that point, and he walked in with Paul Newman and nailed that
Yeah,
scene so well.
absolutely.
So those were my 5 honorable mentions. So I guess you would say out of those 5, Body Snatchers is the one, that and Hills Have Eyes you would agree with?
Yeah,
Decent movies?
I would say so, and I'll give you my one if I could just remember. Oh
Yeah.
no, I do remember it. It was Maniac, the
Oh, yes.
2013, where I said, no, that's a huge mistake because it is so rooted in the performance. The original is so rooted
Mhm.
in the performance and the locale that you're just out of your mind to do that. It's like doing Night of the Living Dead in a high rise. It's no, you know.
Yeah, and then you
So
hear about it, you're like, "Frodo? Frodo's gonna be a serial killer?
and
What?"
and then it just goes down from that because like you said, Frodo's going to be a serial killer. Um, and I had seen him in Cooties and thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I
Yeah.
got a kick out of it. It's kind of a fun little movie. But anyway, but I realized through Cooties, okay, maybe he'll be good in it. And I thought he knocked it out of the park, and it was a good movie.
It's
So
a
that's
it's a brutal movie. It
yes,
really
but
because
it should be.
I don't think it was released unrated. It was an R rating, but it was a vicious R rating, and yes, it should be that. That's
Absolutely should be because so was the original was a brutal movie and a dark, scummy kind of way. And
and they
uh
tried to make it their own with what appeared to be a gimmick, just doing the whole film from his point of view, but it worked.
yep,
I really think it worked.
yep. It's dark. It's supposed to be dark, and I think they really did a good job. And and I applauded it, but man, was I surprised when I liked it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot as well.
All right, so that's going to conclude this episode of Monster Kid Fury. Thank you so much for joining us. Next time, the second half of Remakes.